What is going on, guys? Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Feeling a little bit under the weather today. I was supposed to go to my girl's house. I told her I gotta go home and sleep, and I'm still at the shop, so I figured, you know what, I'll do a video for you guys and talk about knock, which is something that I've been wanting to make a video about for a very long time. I'm gonna try to go in as much detail as I can and try to give off as much information as I can, and if I miss something, please feel free to drop it in the comments and ask me, and I'll gladly answer in there. And because I am sick and I probably have COVID-22, I would appreciate it if you guys hit that subscription button and the bell button, but subscribe, so you guys get a notification next time I drop a tech talk or just an update on the shop car, which some special stuff's going on with that. Anyway, I want to talk about knock. Knock/detonation, not pre-ignition, which is different from knock and detonation, and talk about the detrimental effects it has on the combustion engine, how you can prevent it, what causes it, the damage it causes, and yeah, pretty much anything I can think of, because as you guys know, my videos aren't edited, so I just pretty much talk like I would to my customer, and then I just post it. So there's no cut, there's no intro, there's nothing like that, which I guess makes my channel kind of boring. But for the people that actually enjoy the tech topics, this is my kind of content, so I'm sure you guys are enjoying it. Anyway, let's talk about knock. What is knock? Knock is the spontaneous combustion of the air and fuel charge that's in your cylinder. So when you're not asking for it, it self-combusts. So the way this works is, you go into ECU, or you go on the distributor, and then essentially you turn it, or let's just talk about EFI. You ask for a certain amount of ignition advance, which happens before top dead center on the compression stroke on the auto cycle, 4-cycle engine. You ask for a certain amount of advance, which means before it reaches top dead center, you're charging that coil and discharging that coil, and you're firing that spark plug at a certain degree. So let's just use some arbitrary numbers. Let's just say 20 degrees. If I ask for 20 degrees of timing advance, that means the spark plug is going to fire, theoretically it should fire 20 degrees before it reaches top dead center on the compression stroke. Meaning both valves are closed, I'm compressing the air and fuel charge, and I'm firing that spark plug 20 degrees before that engine, the piston reaches top dead center. Ideal combustion pressure happens about 10 to 15 degrees after top dead center. So that would be essentially on the power stroke, 10 or 15 degrees after. If I over advance the ignition timing, that peak cylinder pressure is going to happen earlier, and it's actually going to fight the piston coming up, and it's going to lose power. Now, it's kind of ironic because on good fuels like E85, if you're a novice tuner, or even if you're a good tuner, and you overtime an engine, you might not have any failure if your engine components are up to par. For instance, your head gasket is, super rigid. You have O-rings in the head. You have really good head studs. If you're not detonating the motor, you can actually get away with over advancing the engine and not have any detrimental effects. Obviously, you lose power because that peak cylinder pressure is happening after the point that it should be, which I've actually had on the dyno, believe it or not. I've had it 5-6 degrees over advance, which I've pulled timing back, and the car's getting like 50-60 horsepower, which is kind of mind-boggling because you think more timing is better, right? Not always. Anyway, the problem with that is with pump gas or low octane fuels, you cannot get to MBT, or maximum brake torque, or minimum timing for best torque, without detrimental effects. So what knock is spontaneous combustion of the air and fuel. When knock happens, you're gonna have a lot of problems. If you have a car, let's talk about a 4G6, or if you have a sub 400 horsepower 4G63, if you do not have prolonged knock happening, you might be okay. The ECU might pull some timing, but if you do have prolonged knock without the ECU correcting it, you might not lose a connecting rod right away, or you might not melt a piston right away, or scuff the cylinder right away, but eventually it's gonna slowly start to eat away at it. We had a car on the dyno recently, which before it came to us, it had this knock problem, but anyway, we took it apart for a different reason. but it did suffer from a very serious knock, and I just want to show you guys the damage that it can do and the types of damage that knock can do. First and foremost, you want to pull your spark plugs whenever you're doing any kind of tuning, or even if you're not a tuner. Let's say you're a racer, do a wide open throttle pull on the track towards the end of the track. Whenever you get to the end of the track, slow the car down, shut it down as fast as you can, pull your plugs and look at it. If you see any specking or peppering, you know, any aluminum material around the center electrode or the ground electrode, ground strap, that's knock happening. Essentially what it's doing, it's chipping away at the piston, and the piston material is sticking to this part. I don't know chemistry that well. I mean, I know some stuff latent heat of vaporization. That's why E85 is awesome, because it pulls heat out of the charge temp. But for some reason, the piston material ends up sticking to the ground strap and the porcelain of the spark plug. In severe instances, you will break the porcelain of the spark plug, which is exactly what happened here. I hope you guys can see this. Sorry guys, I'm tired. I'm trying to do this as efficiently as I can, but I'm also, again, one-man team right now. So when that happens, when you break an electrode, a porcelain, I'm sorry, a couple things can happen. A, it could literally just leave the cylinder whenever the exhaust valve opens. B, it could bounce around a little bit and leave when the exhaust valve opens. Or C, it could bounce around a little bit and then get stuck between the exhaust valve when it closes and you lose an exhaust valve. So most of the time, if you have severe detonation for prolonged periods of time, even if you don't have a spark plug that's, you know, broken or anything like that, you can hammer the ring lance so hard, which these are detonation marks, by the way. That's det marks right there. You can hammer the ring lance so hard that the ring does not spin it in anymore. So that's exactly what we got going on here. Every single one of them, all 4 pistons, the top ring land is hammered so hard that the top ring, the compression ring, does not spin. That's a problem. These rings spin at about 2 to 3 RPM, so 2-3 times a minute they spin in the cylinder bore. That's why you have the cross hatches. Well, you have it to retain oil, because these are always riding on a thin film of oil. But you also, I thought I had to get my gum for a second, but I guess I don't. Anyway, but you also don't want this to stick, because if it does, well, this compression ring is stuck right now, so it's not doing its job as a compression ring. What that means is you're going to lose compression in one cylinder. It could be slowly, or it could be very detrimental. It could happen right away. But the problem is the second ring is a Napier ring that has a hook on it. Its job is 80% oil control and 20% compression control. That 20% compression control, if you have the oil seep into the cylinder, you're going to have a detonation event again, because oil lowers the octane of your fuel. So, of course, that's bad. Sorry, I have to keep on. I hope I'm making sense here. Of course, if you have oil in your combustion chamber, you know, it's going to lower your octane significantly, and it's going to knock, even if you're on E85. So most of the time, that's when E85 cars knock, is when they have, you know, super loose engines that have ring sealing problems, or they've detonated the engine enough that, you know, oil is actually getting inside the combustion chamber in the cylinder, and it doesn't matter if you know you have VP import, it's still gonna knock because you got oil in there. That's gonna knock the octane down so much that it's gonna knock if you have enough cylinder pressure in there, which for the most part, most of the Evo guys, including myself, you know, making over 900 horsepower, making over 200 horsepower per hole, if you have a detonation event, it's most likely going to be catastrophic. So you're going to, you know, melt right through it, something, or you're going to hammer bearing to the point that, you know, point of no return, essentially. You chuck a rod, which we call the window mod in the Evo world, or I guess everybody calls it that. But anyway, which brings me to my next point. The rod bearing on the connecting rod side. So guys, whenever you have a detonation event, again, it's like taking a sledgehammer and hitting the top of the piston with it, right? So when you do that, you're displacing the oil that's between the bearing and the crankshaft journal. That's called the hydrodynamic wedge. You have a pressurized layer of oil that's in between the bearing and the crankshaft journal. Well, when you have detonation events, that tends to get knocked out. So when that's knocked out, you have metal to metal contact. At lower power levels, lower cylinder pressures, I should say, not power levels, because this is not no power level. There's no cylinder pressure. You'll slightly start to dissipate that, but if you're making a lot of power, you can chuck that oil out so quickly and so hard that you can literally fuse the bearing to the crankshaft and chuck this right out of the right out of the block. So that's another problem. Of course, whenever you have the spark plug bouncing around, it can scuff the cylinders and do all kinds of crazy stuff, which is exactly what happened on this client's engine, which is very unfortunate, but we caught it at a good time. He also had a bunch of other issues with his engine. His Myvec filter was clogged to the point that I probably got like 100 grams of metal shavings out from the previous engine failure. I don't think they ever replaced the oil cooler. I'm surprised that the bearings didn't, completely go beforehand. The main bearings look terrible, but rod bearings look pretty damn decent. But anyway, knock can be very detrimental, guys. And remember, it doesn't matter if you have 120 octane or whatever. You can get away with it if you don't have oil in the cylinder, or if you don't have anything that will lower your octane. But if you don't have stout components such as, let's say a 46.3, if I'm making 1,000 horsepower, let's say a 6466 or a 6870 at 50 pounds of boost, I don't have O-rings. I don't have let's say I have the best head studs and I don't have O-rings. I have an OEM head gasket, 50 pounds of boost, I lift the head. Well, that's because I'm over pressurizing the cylinder for the components that I have. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's knocking. It means it's just over pressurizing the cylinder and lifting the head. If we take the same thing to pump gas with something with low octane fuel, we can't even get to the point that we lift the head. We get to the point that we can melt it, completely shoot through a head gasket because of a combustion event, not because of a head lift event. Of course, the same thing applies with high octane fuel. You can still lift the head if you don't have the best components. Or not even the best components. You can have the best components and have some crappy tuning, and you can still blow through a head gasket. The point is, detonation is bad. You got to find a way to essentially make sure your engine does not detonate. The stock ECU does a fairly good job at detecting knock and pulling back timing when it needs to. Unfortunately, I've seen some calibrators essentially make the low octane and high octane ignition map the same. So if it detects knock, it does not do jack shit. Or they will, turn the knock sensor off completely, which is something that should never be done unless it's your personal car and you're experimenting with like a super high octane fuel. But when it comes to aftermarket ECUs such as Motec, Haltech, AEM, there are knock thresholds that you can set up, and the way you do that is you will run, well, first of all, you would check base timing if it's a fresh build. Base timing ensures that the actual timing that you're demanding is the same timing that's actually being applied to the plug at the certain degree that you're asking in the auto cycle. So, if you're milling the head and you're milling the block and putting everything back together, you definitely need to check base timings, but especially on these Evos. I've seen so many heads lifted because they don't check base timing. Could be off as far as 5 degrees. You could be asking for 17 degrees of timing by redline, and it could be giving you 21 degrees or 22 degrees. That's a big difference in a high power car. So you do have knock threshold tables that you can set up, which is why I love standalone ECUs. You have deck cans that you can listen to, knock, essentially the knock noise that the engine produces, and it's kind of distinctive, so you kind of have to have some ear experience, which a lot of people have more ear experience than I do, but I can distinguish it at this point. But the knock tables are pretty damn awesome because you can pull back a lot of timing, do a couple pulls down in your air and fuel, and make sure your timing is conservative enough after you check your base timing, and draw a knock floor. Once you draw a knock floor, once knocks, it makes this much noise at this RPM, you can kind of draw a floor, and then if you keep advancing the timing and it's okay, well, it's not knocking anymore. But if you give it another degree and it starts spiking, that's knock happening. Another thing is, on high octane fuel, most of the time, the engine does not knock, but you can absolutely have knock on high octane fuel as well. It's just a lot harder for the knock sensor to pick up because usually, let's say on E85, Jay from Rio Street gave a fantastic example. It's like shoving a sock into somebody's mouth and hitting them. Well, if you hit them without the sock, they're gonna scream pretty loud, you know. But if you shove something in their mouth and you hit them, they can't make the same noise. It's essentially the same thing because you're injecting so much fuel into the cylinder on E85, you know, 30-40% more fuel, that the knock sensor is not picking up the same noise at the same frequency because it doesn't sound the same. So I hope this has been a lesson for someone. I mean, knock is very serious. We take it very seriously over here. We do everything we can to obviously eliminate it. I have every single, aside from the link knock block, I have every single knock detection tool you can think of. And we were extremely careful, especially on pump gas, because knock can and will ruin engines and bearings. And you know, you can have the best components, you can have a billet block, you can have a billet crank, you can still hurt stuff if you're not careful enough. So this is why you got to pick a tuner that knows what they're doing. They're competent and confident in what they're doing, because this is, you know, it's your hard-earned money. If I was a, you know, enthusiast and I wanted to get my car tuned, I would definitely want to take it to somebody that, you know, does not just, you know, turn off a knock sensor and just throw timing at it, saying, no, this is okay, because most of the time when I tune this combination, it works. Well, every engine is different, you know. Anyway, long story short, knock is terrible. In this instance, we're gonna put some SPL 900 pistons on this. Still waiting on the client to see if he wants to go to 156 mil rods, because these are 150s. We got a stock crank in that. I think it's cracked. Stock cranks crack literally when you sneeze, let alone when you have like crazy detonation events like this. So maybe we'll do a long, well, not a long rod, but a semi-long rod 2.4, and we could rev it to 8500, which we shouldn't even need to. It's a FE black setup, but I like the long rod because of the less side loading on the cylinder walls. Anyway, I hope I've covered enough. If I haven't, please feel free to comment. I really appreciate you guys watching. I just do these videos because it's not about the money. I don't even collect money from YouTube, to be honest with you. I do monetize the videos. I don't know how to access my monetization account, so it has nothing to do with that. It's just me passing along knowledge, and I get a bunch of customers from these YouTube videos too. So I appreciate everybody watching, everybody supporting, and we got big news coming for the shop car. So stay safe, put good fuel in your car, don't pump 87, and don't put any octane booster in your car, because that's very stupid. Hope you guys have a great night.